If you found yourself saying, I can't start writing yet, I need to read a bit more first, and it's the fourth or the fifth time you've said that, this video is for you. Because here's the truth that nobody tells you when you're trying to learn how to write a literature review. You will never feel like you've read enough. Not once, not even the day before submission, not even when you're sat in your thesis defence or viva, especially then. So today, I'm going to share with you 3 signs that it's time to stop reading and start writing. Without guilt, without panic, without feeling like you're missing something. So let's get into it. PhD researchers love a good reading spiral. You find one article that leads to another article that leads to a reference list, which leads to 14 more PDFs. And suddenly, your quick skim of the literature turns into this 7-hour reading PDF collecting binge fest. And the worst part about all of this is you still feel behind. You feel guilty. You feel bad that you've collected all these things, but you haven't read a single one of them from start to finish. And you're not really in a position to write anything or to say anything about a single one of those papers. And the thing is, the reading never ends, okay? Because knowledge isn't finite. There's always another perspective, another critique, another angle that you could have explored, another classic or so-called classic that you should have read. But you don't need to read everything to write a brilliant critical literature review. You just need to read strategically. So let's take a look at the first of 3 signs that you should probably stop reading and start writing. The first one is when you can explain your topic in 3, 4, or 5 big themes. And this is a really important part of getting good at doing a literature review. It's learning to identify the patterns. For example, if your research explores youth volunteering in environmental projects in Los Angeles, your themes might be youth identity development, motivation and belonging, environmental justice and local context, barriers to participation. If you can talk about your topic through themes like this, rather than individual authors, congratulations. You have got what you need to begin that critical literature review. At this point, more reading starts to give you diminishing returns, where you're not learning new ideas, you're just creating duplicates, you're just collecting more references to put into those brackets. And yes, it's really important to keep up with the literature, to keep up to date. So add the odd study as things get published throughout your PhD and as you become aware of them. But don't wait for the publishing, the knowledge generation, the papers, the books around your area to stop coming before you start writing, because they won't, okay? You have to draw a line in the sand at some point and say, okay, I feel confident enough now. I can talk about 3, 4, or 5 main themes in my area. So I'm happy to just leave the literature alone and leave it to just tick along and other papers to come out, and I'll become aware of them as they do. And I am just going to sit down and get started on my literature review. I'm actually going to start writing it. Quick question before we move on to the second one. What is keeping you in the endless reading loop right now? Is it the fear of missing something? Feeling that you need to read more because you're not expert enough, you don't know enough yet? Or just the guilt of only having read a certain number of papers or a certain number of books? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely read and respond to all of them, and other people who are watching this video and looking through the comments will probably find what you've got to say really helpful for them. The second sign that it's time to stop the reading for now and get on with writing your literature review is when you're reading something and you can predict exactly what it's going to say next. I love this one, and it's my favourite one, because when you get to this point and when you realise what's coming next in a paper or what's coming next in a book chapter, that is when you start to grow in confidence as a researcher. That's when you begin to think, goodness me, I actually know my stuff here. I know my field. You'll be reading a paper and you'll think to yourself, I already know exactly where this fits. Or I know what's coming up in that next paragraph. Or, yeah, this is just another example of this theory or this perspective. This sits in this bucket over here. And this is how you know that your brain has started to draw a mental map of that field. And this is what a real critical literature review is built on. Not endless reading, but recognising debates and themes and gaps and patterns. Once you can predict the conversation, once you're only a few lines in and you already know what's coming next, it's time for you to join that conversation. That's writing time. The third and final sign is when the questions that you ask yourself as you're reading begin to shift. Your questions start to shift from what else is out there, what else can I collect, to how does this fit with my work? How does this help shape my argument? And that is the moment where you have crossed from information gathering to analysis. And when you begin your literature review journey, you start off just collecting, okay? Collect, get as many PDFs as I can. It's kind of like Pokemon. You got to catch them all, but you don't know what all is. So you're just diving in and grabbing everything. And early doors, that's okay, that's fine, but it can't last forever, okay? You are very, very quickly going to get overwhelmed with that stuff. And the whole got to collect them all thing was certainly something I did during my own PhD. I collected so many PDFs. As I got further into my literature review, another thing started to shift as well as the questions that I was asking myself, and that was how I was interacting with what I was reading. And you should look out for this too. The things I read early on, the printouts of the journal articles, they were absolutely covered in highlights and in my handwritten notes, and I couldn't get past one paragraph without thinking, oh, I've got to write this down, I've got to put this in my notes, I've got to kind of get this quote and put it somewhere safe. And my notes on the articles and the book chapters that I was reading were often longer than the articles and the book chapters themselves. Literally 20, 30 plus pages of notes on one thing. It was really out of control. But as I read more, I started to get more confident in my understanding. I got to know what the specific words and concepts and theories and arguments were all about, so I didn't feel the need to make a load of notes on them when I saw them again. I started to act less like a sponge and more like a filter. And my questions went from, what can I learn from this fountain of knowledge author who's written this masterpiece? To, okay, but how is this relevant for what I'm doing? When you start noticing things like this happening, you are moving from just summarising what other people say and sometimes regurgitating what other people say to forming your own stance on it, forming your own position on it, which is a crucial part of a critical literature review. You no longer need more articles. What you do need are these things. You need to start explaining what the field agrees on, where the debates are, what's missing, and where your study fits. You have the raw material. Now it's time to shape it. And remember, you will always feel like there's more to read. But you can reassure yourself through the knowledge that you've created from the reading that you've done so far. Rather than focusing on the deficit, on the gap, on the things you haven't read, focus on what you can do, what you have taken on board, the critical observations that you have made. And those are the makings of a critical literature review. Popping up on your screen right now is another video that you might enjoy if you like this one. It's all about a challenge that may well come up for you once you start writing, once you start getting those ideas down on the page and exploring all of the things that you've noticed about the literature. You may well get to the point where you overshoot your word count massively. And that is completely normal, okay? And sometimes I think it's better to do that. It's better to just get everything out, just get it all on the page and then trim afterwards than it is to try and restrict yourself and limit yourself as you're writing. What can you do if that does happen? Well, take a look at this video because in it I share some strategies for how you can cut down your word count without losing the meaning of any of the wonderful things that you've written within it. So go and check that out. I'll see you in there.